Hello team players, and welcome to the last video of 2024. Today we're building a Tengu Ruffian Rogue. Let's dive in. So those of you that have seen my shorts know that we rolled completely randomly for this, and we got the Taloned Tengu. So we have a Talon's unarmed attack that deals 1d4 slashing damage. And of course, as a Tengu, we automatically get a Beak unarmed attack that deals 1d6 piercing damage. It might not seem like these attacks do very much, but remember that we're pretty much always going to have flanking thanks to our Necromancer's Thralls, which means sneak attack pretty much all the time, as both of these attacks do have the finesse trait, and we are a Ruffian Rogue, which means, yes, we do get a sneak attack with these weapons. And our Talons do have the Agile trait, which means that less of a multiple attack penalty, which is big for this build. Although these weapons are finesse weapons, we do want to focus on strength in this build, as the Necromancer's Thralls won't be able to give us flanking all the time. So we'll want to be making foes flat-footed to everyone with things like tripping and grappling. We'll also want charisma for this build, because we'll also be focusing a lot on deception and intimidation in this build, as those are other ways we can get the flat-footed condition, as well as lowering enemy stats. And we will need a little bit of dexterity in this build so we can wear medium armor, as our dexterity won't be great. That's why we're focusing on strength. I know that sounds weird for a Tengu, but that's how it goes. The main thing is we do want to have at least decent AC, and so we need a little bit of dex. For skills, athletics is going to be a big one, and so is intimidation and deception. We can have a little bit of diplomacy as well. We are a rogue after all, and we're going to have a lot of skills. We don't really need intelligence or wisdom for this build, so we're not going to be as good at recall knowledge as we could be. That doesn't mean that we can't have ranks in it. It just means we're not going to be as good at it as other classes. Alright, our first feat for this build is gonna be You're Next. So if we reduce an enemy down to 0 hit points, we can, as a reaction, demoralize a foe within 60 feet, with a +2 bonus. Like I said, intimidation is gonna be a big part of this build, and we're gonna take down foes pretty easily, because we have multiple ways of making foes flat-footed in this build. I mean, right now, all we really have is athletic actions and flanking with the Necromancer's Thralls. But we're gonna have more as we level up here. So getting sneak attack pretty much all the time is really gonna help us knock foes down to 0 hit points, which means we get to use this a lot. For our Ancestry feat at level 1, we're gonna take Squawk. So if we critically fail a deception, diplomacy, or intimidation check against any creature that's not a Tengu, we can get a failure instead. Being able to just say, you know what, no, to a critical failure on 2 of our main skills is huge. I mean, yes, this ends up being a once per encounter thing, but especially on our feints, this is gonna help a ton, as, yeah, rolling that nat 1 never feels good unless you have this feat. At level 2, of course, we're going to be taking Brutal Beating. We're a Ruffian Rogue, so we have access to this. So every time we critically hit a foe that's off guard, they're Frightened 1. Frightened is one of the best conditions in the game. It basically levels them down by 1, or whatever the number is attached to it. That means it's even easier for all party members to hit, as well as avoid anything they try to do. And of course, we are going to be taking a feat that is going to help us take advantage of that as well, which is of course Dread Striker. If a foe has a frightened condition, they're off guard to us. As like I said, intimidation is a big part of this build. Demoralize is going to be an action we should use on our third action pretty much all the time. And remember that Brutal Beating, they don't become immune for 10 minutes, unlike Demoralize. But rogues don't exactly have the best attack bonuses. But that's where other builds in this party come into play. And of course, the multiple ways we have of making foes off guard. For our level 5 Ancestry feat, we're going to take Tengu Feather Fan. This essentially gives us the Gust of Wind spell once a day. This allows us to push enemies to where we want them to be to a certain extent. And we can't push them towards us, but we can push them pretty much everywhere else. into hazards, or away from us if we're low on health. It also allows us to knock enemies prone in certain situations, which of course is another way we can get our sneak attack. And it's particularly effective against creatures that have a fly speed, as if those fail, they take the effects of the critical failure. And that means they take fall damage in addition to the 2d6 bludgeoning damage they take from being knocked prone. Of course, if they critically fail, then you're not going to be able to sneak attack them that turn because they're pushed back 30 feet. And this does take 2 actions. But they are prone, so they're easier to hit for everybody but you, essentially. It's probably better if they just regularly fail for you, but it's good for the team if they crit fail. Level 6 is when this build gets interesting, because we'll be taking the Monk dedication. Yes, this doesn't really give us a whole lot. I mean, it gives us training in Monk class DC, and we're already trained in athletics, so we'll probably get acrobatics here. But we are taking this because we do need Monk feats for this build. Level 8 is when we get really good with our feints, because we'll be taking Stumbling Stance. Believe it or not, Stumbling Stance is one of the few stances for Monk that does not require us to be unarmored. Not only does this give us a +1 bonus on our deception checks to feint, but it also gives us a 1d8 unarmed attack that has agile, backstabber, and finesse. They're the only strikes we can make in that stance, but they do allow us to add our sneak attack. And if any enemy hits us with a melee strike while we're in this stance, then they become off guard to the next strike we make against them before the end of our next turn. And then of course, for our level 9 Ancestry feat, we're going to need Wind God's Fan. This gives us one more use of our Tengu Feather Fan and allows us to cast Wall of Wind in addition to Gust of Wind. One of the main things we want to do in this build is trap enemies with our Necromancer's Thralls, in addition to ourselves, which means having a wall of wind around enemies is a big deal. And it's a wall of wind, which means our Necromancer can summon his thralls on the other side of it, because he does have line of sight with that. And finally for this video, at level 10, we're going to take Monk's Flurry. Unfortunately, Monk's Flurry has been nerfed, as you can only use it once per 1d4 rounds, but getting 2 sneak attacks for 1 action, even if it is only once every 1d4 rounds, is kind of a big deal. It is at regular and multiple attack penalty, but that kind of action economy isn't something you can pass up, especially since we do have spells in this build. I've talked about all the spells that this build has access to, so let's talk about free archetype. Obviously, if you've got free archetype, then you'll want to take your monk or martial artist archetype on that side of free archetype. But if you're looking for something else, martial is an excellent choice for this build, as you're going to be trained in all martial weapons. You won't use them, but you will be trained in them, and you'll obviously be trained in intimidation. And Dread Martial Stance is one of the best feats I've ever seen. But the archetype that I recommend the most for this build is definitely the Claw Dancer, because that archetype has insane action economy. You might not even need to take Monk's Flurry if you've got that particular archetype on your free archetype. We do have a Talon's attack because we are a Taloned Tengu, which means that archetype is 100% available to us. And that's the build. So, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you guys want to see this build all the way to level 20, then you can check out the Patreon page for a Google Sheet that contains all the feats I took all the way to level 20. That link is in the description below, along with my social media and my Discord. But if you guys want to see the rest of the builds in this party, you can check them out right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.